Hello and welcome to 𝗩𝗵𝗱𝗲𝗂𝗂𝗋𝗆𝗉𝗋.com, where we teach you all about gardening in the great indoors. If you'd like to support our show, please use our Amazon affiliate link below. Today I have a viewer-inspired video for you. How to wick if you aren't repotting. So how to wick an African violet plant if you aren't repotting. This question was asked by Works in Progress. And I am going to show you just how to do that. I'm using a mini African violet. You can also use standard size African violets as well. So I have this African violet in this pot, it's doing well. Doesn't quite need a repotting, could soon, but I do want to create a wick system for it, and I do have another video on wicking African violets, creating wicking systems as well. When you're repotting, I will put a link for that as well as any other videos I mentioned in this video and any related videos that would help you down in the comments section below. Okay, so here we are. We've got this nice little plant, African violet. Okay, so I'm going to put the wicking material in. Now, wicking materials, what you want to use is nylon. This is nylon yarn or some sort of a nylon string, something that will absorb water. Needs to be so acrylic in nature, and this is a darning needle, I believe, so it's a big needle with a big head. You can also, some people will use a really thin crochet hook, or they'll create a hook with a stiff wire. I fortunately have this guy, so this works well. Now what I did to get this through here, I'll show you more closely here, just so if you're wondering how I did that. So I did put tape on the end here, and was able to, once I had the tape on here, fit it into the hole, which is a fairly good size hole, but still it was a little on the challenging side. So I'm going to take the tape off because I don't need it anymore, just so you can see that. Okay, so now go out a little bit more so we don't lose anything. Okay, in the shot here. So what you want the wick hanging down into the water. The capillary action will create to get this wet, and then it will create constant moisture going up to the pot, the soil in the pot, in the African violet pot, but just not too much, but just like a continual moisture. And African violets do really well growing in this manner. Now, there are other plants that you wouldn't necessarily do this with, but for African violets, it's a very, very handy way to grow them. Okay, so we have this. It's basically like stringing it like a needle and thread. You want to get it wet before you insert it into the pot. So I am going to, this is what I'm going to be using as my wicking system once this is done. So I'm just going to use, this is clean water that I put in there, warm water. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mix in here and get this nice and moistened. Okay, so it's getting wet here. Give it a little more time to soak up some more moisture. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, now that I've got it nice and wet, I'm going to cut it afterwards rather than before. So once I position it on in the moisture. The moisture, this is a jar, but there's other things you can use that are a little more decorative as well. Okay, so here we go. So now what you want to do, you do need a pot that does have drainage holes. So this does have drainage holes. This obviously isn't going to work if you don't have drainage holes, but you shouldn't be growing an African violet without drainage holes anyway. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick the darning needle up through a hole. A little bit hard to show with all these leaves here, but getting the picture here, and you'll see it in a sec too when I pull it through. Now, Make sure not to stab the leaves. That's another little tricky thing. So this is a little bit of tricky maneuvering here. Not actually something that you want to try to do quickly. Okay, so I've pulled it up through. So I can show you here. I'm going to hang this down over the side here. Give you a little bit of a closer view here. So it's hanging out. So I managed to pull this out. You can see that if you're lucky. Yeah, it's always a little on the tricky side, but you can see there we go. So there's the needle on the bottom. There's the yarn on the top. Okay, now I pulled it through quite a bit. You don't necessarily want to pull it through that much. What you're going to do is you're going to leave it a little bit underneath the soil, and then this is what's going to hang into the container. You're going to want to do this in this size pot, about 2 of them, 2 wicks. Bigger pots, you want to go 3, 4 wicks, depending on the size of the pot. So about, for this is this pot size, 2 is plenty in this pot size. I'm going to show you with 1, and you'll get the, you can repeat it. So what I'm going to do here is you can see where I did pull it through, right? And I do want to get it to go underneath the soil. So what I'm going to do, and since I did string it, I'm going to have to cut it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull it out enough, pull it through enough so I have something to work with. Then I am going to cut it with scissors. Then well, you don't want to spill water all over the place in the process, but we will continue here, and you'll get the idea. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, once I've cut it, I've pulled this through, and then I've got the 2 ends, right? So I'm going to go ahead and tie them into a little knot situation. So you want to replicate everything I'm doing but spilling water all over the table. And so once you get this little knot situation under control here, you've got a nice knot in it. Then what you do is you pull back through, as I'm doing here, until you get the knot just under the soil surface. So there we go. It's no longer visible. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this in here, but then I have to figure out, okay, it's a little too long. You don't want it winding in there, and obviously I'm going to have to refill this now that I've spilt it everywhere. But you want it to hang almost to the bottom of the pot. So at this point, I can kind of eyeball it. I can cut some off. These scissors are not being cooperative. Okay, now put it back in. So as I mentioned, you really want it kind of, it's not going to be terrible if it's winding down there, but I find that it's better if it's just hanging right into the bottom, or with a little bit of clearance down there, so that it's not winding around down there. Because the longer the yarn or whatever material you're using, the more the longer it's going to take for it to cycle, the water cycle up. So there's no point in making it more difficult. Okay, so this is good. It is in the bottom of that. As you can see, once I fill it up more, it's going to be a lot more full, instead of what's all over the table here. So you can see though that it is there. It's hanging into the bottom of the pot, and it will continue to wet the soil as the capillary action creates the movement of the water up into the soil. Keep this moist, and then you do want to regularly, every 1 to 2 weeks, change the water so that it doesn't become build up in toxins and such. And that's it. So it's a lot easier to not have to worry about watering your African violets when you grow them with a wicking system. And this is a very tall wicking system. You can have a much shorter one. Just keep in mind, the shorter it is, the less water it is, the more often you're going to have to make sure that you fill the wicking system. But that gives you a good idea here of how that's done. And what I'll do now, so remember I have a little knot in there, it's keeping it pretty secure in there. I'm going to go ahead and rethread the darning needle, pull another one up through, do the same thing, cut it at the top, cut it off so it's a good length at the bottom, hanging just like this one, just a little bit above the bottom of the jar, or whatever the wicking system container, the vessel that you're using. And there I will have it. I will have managed to get the wicking system into an already potted plant. When I do repot this, I will have to adjust the wicks again. You can use new ones. If it hasn't been too long, you can use the same ones and just pull them, make sure to pull them, position them when you repot, and as mentioned, that's shown in my other video, and then use them again. So there you have it, an answer to that question: how do I get a wick into an already potted up plant? Thank you for stopping by today. Please leave any comments about any indoor gardening tutorials you'd like to see. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. And please check the bell if you'd like to be notified when new videos are released.